Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Yes. Yeah. Uh-huh. Of course, I understand that. I totally understand that English is not their priority. But my argument here is that if you focus on the skills which will make them better at studying everything, then it's going to help them with their other subjects too. And I think that students at university level and with that level of education can understand that. Here we're talking about study skills. This is going to help you with everything. And that would be my argument. No, I don't think we should give up. But it's a challenge. I agree it's a challenge, but I think it's our most important challenge because I think it's something which impacts on their whole life. It's not just about learning English. No? Thank you very much for that. Thank you. So here are some ideas then about things that maybe you can do. Okay? Everybody okay? Not falling asleep yet? No? How are we doing for time? How much more time have I got? Okay, we're fine then. Okay, jolly good. Okay. Now, these are not very revolutionary ideas. The question that is more revolutionary is how often do you ask your students to do these kind of things outside the classroom in order to prepare for their classes, or taking your point that they have other priorities, actually taking class time to do some of these things, to actually find the information that they need. Now, I know, again, in some locations it's difficult, you don't have the internet, and I accept that totally. But where you do, then you should be incorporating these kind of activities. Okay, a couple more. These traditionally we have done movies and songs, but I'm not sure how well we've actually used them to engage people's emotions. I think sometimes we're obsessed about the pedagogy, and we don't actually take time to ask them if they like the song. I remember once observing a student at ISELT level who had taken a lot of time to prepare an activity around her favorite song with a group of 14-year-olds. Her favorite song was, "I Did It My Way." For 14-year-olds? Frank Sinatra. I mean, even I can't stand Frank Sinatra. I'm 64. Give me progressive rock any day. Okay. Do they like it? Let them bring their own songs, things that move them, movies that they have enjoyed. Watch extracts and get them to explain them. Don't correct their grammar. get their emotions engaged. This movie affected me because. All of that. Okay. Successful students do all of that. They go into all of these sites. Do you encourage them to do that? Or do you tell them off? This is important, language being used in the real world. One of my MA students, would you like to say something about the movement for English as a lingua franca? What is English as a lingua franca? Anybody want to volunteer? I won't force you. Okay.
English as a lingua franca means that we use English to communicate with people from that uses other languages, but that is the language to have a communication, to communicate ideas or negotiate or anything, even when we have different languages, and we respect that we have different languages and cultures and accents, but we use English to exchange information.
What's the most important thing about understanding the funny changes in language that non-natives employ when they're speaking English? Why is it important to understand that?
I think it's important to understand that because people use English to express themselves, but they keep their identities while they are expressing themselves and their cultural traits.
So maybe people don't want to lose their, thank you very much indeed, Esther. Maybe people don't want to lose their identity, you know, maybe they don't want to sound like me. I mean, me on a Sunday, because I mean, if you heard me when I was back in my village, you wouldn't understand me very well. That's how they talk down where I used to live when I was a little girl. But when I'm speaking my Sunday English, of course you can understand me, but maybe they don't want to sound perfect. Maybe they want to keep their identity. I had another MA student who did his research and dissertation on a Mexican variety of English, and he identified common features of Mexican English. How interesting, no? But even more than that, in users of English as a second language and as a lingua franca, as a shared language, they found that people develop communication strategies which enable them to communicate even if they don't have quite the right language. Now, in communicative language teaching, we talk a lot about strategies, but how much do we develop the strategies in the classroom? How much are we focusing on the textbook? How serious is our textbookitis? And at the beginning of the talk, I put my email on the first slide. I'll show it again at the end. If you'd like to have this talk, it's yours. It's on Marisol's computer, so don't worry about trying to write down the links. You can take photos or you can have the talk if you want it, okay? There are so many places where you can do this now. Look. I did this little bit of research and got all of these links. Do you know, if I had a student who could actually show me that they were communicating with an EPAL every week, I might even consider using that as their grade for writing. And it would be something that would actually expose them to real language, with a real person in a real country, you know, instead of a textbook exercise on buying hamburgers in Disneyland. More ideas. And notice that I'm giving you a link for every idea because I did the research myself. Of course, with gaming, you have to be a little bit careful. I once had a most peculiar experience in Second Life, for example. Do you know Second Life? It's an online facility where you can actually set up courses and all kinds of things, and you have an avatar. And I did have a negative experience. But on the whole, I had a PhD student in San Luis Potosí who did her research and her thesis on how students' motivation increased when they were encouraged to do multimedia role play games in the Self-Access Center. Do you know what happened? They started arriving to their sessions on time and staying longer and saying, "Can I come tomorrow, miss?" And guess what? Their English improved too. These are some of the more old-fashioned things. These are some of the more old-fashioned things, perhaps. But I think they still work. And actually, you know how sometimes, especially at universities, you get that student who spent primary school and secondary school al otro lado, and they come back and their English is actually as good as mine or better, you know, and it can be difficult. So why can't they become your teaching assistant? Why can't you officially say, Juanita's English is excellent? And sometimes I know that sometimes people can exempt, but if they want to go on working with their English, why can't they become your assistant and actually help the other students who need it? So they're never a threat, they're always a help. The question here is, do you encourage your students to do some of these things? I've noticed one or two people nodding and a lot of people listening. No? Do you ever get them to draw new vocabulary to help them to remember it, for example? Do you get them to record themselves and then to correct themselves and then to record again? And make it important because this is part of your final grade. Become more sensitive to phonetics. Do you get them to make videos? Good. How many of you have asked your students to do a video this semester? Ha. Okay. What about liking a song and then writing a song? Why does it always have to be listen and fill the blanks? Oh my gosh, if I see another class where it's listen to the song and fill in the blanks, I may die of boredom. And so may the students, which is much worse because I'm very old and they're very young. Instead of giving them language games, why not get them to invent their own? Okay, this group invent a game to help this group practice this language. And you invent a game to help another group practice something else. We don't all have to be doing the same thing, as long as it's relevant to the syllabus. So good students do write in their books. They use color. They enjoy it. The teacher doesn't say, don't write in your book. No. They become creative with language. One of the best experiences in my life was with a group of 11-year-olds who wrote haikus. What is a haiku? It's a Japanese poem. How many syllables? 17. It's 17, that's right. 17 syllables. Does it have to have cohesive grammar? No, not at all. So you can write a haiku with vocabulary, evocative vocabulary. We did this activity, 11-year-olds in a classroom, and every group produced their haiku. Guess what they gave teacher for Christmas? A bound book of haikus. Everybody in the group, there are about 30 students, wrote their own haiku, and they took it to be engargolado, and they gave me a book of haikus for Christmas. Get them to write about how they feel. It doesn't have to be that essay of what I did in my holidays. Again, every year. How often do you actually encourage them? Why not? Why not? Okay. So then let's go back. We've had a bit of fun here, and I've given you lots of ideas of things to actually try to make the less successful students be more like the more successful students, because these are things that more successful students do. Okay. Let's come back to principles then, and this man Nation, some of you have read, I know, his work, recommends, first of all, that as teachers, we should think about the meaning of the input we're giving. Whatever the textbook says, if the input is boring, oh sorpresa, the students will be bored. So yes, you have to cover the language that might appear in an exam, but maybe you can find other ways of doing it. If you give them meaning-focused input meaning listening texts, reading texts, videos, movies, again, oh sorpresa, they're likely to produce meaning-focused output. They'll actually be expressing what they think, what they enjoy, what they like, what they dislike. Mustn't forget the language-focused spaces. There must be a time every week when you focus on form. And when I say form, it has to do with the written form, the grammar, and also phonology. Because even though I do think people should retain their accents, if they want to, they have to be intelligible. So we have to both expose them to lovely accents like Indian people speaking English, which I think is beautiful. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, so they have to be able to understand that, but at the same time, they have to express themselves intelligibly, not like the Queen of England, because actually, nobody on the planet speaks like the Queen of England except the Queen of England. Britain, sorry. Sorry, Scots. Okay. So we have to have this space to focus on form, but we also have to have lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of fluency development opportunities where we don't correct them, where we show genuine interest in what they're saying. I often tell a little story about a conversation where I was talking to a Mexican whom I love very much indeed, and I was trying to say something really important emotionally. And this person corrected my grammar. That is so frustrating. Of course I don't. I have awful grammar sometimes in Spanish because I never studied it. I learnt it in la escuela de la vida, you know. But that wasn't the point at that moment. It was the wrong moment. And when my students are exhausted, upset, tired, demotivated, I never correct anything. Just say what you want to say. And if you have to say it in Spanish, say it in Spanish. And then if you want to, we can think about maybe how you might say it in English if you wanted to. You know. But you have to engage people's emotions. And you have to make them feel that English is about understanding and being understood by other people. It's not that English is the best language in the world. There isn't a best language in the world. But it is important as a lingua franca to communicate with people all over this planet. This goes all the way back to Krashen, doesn't it, as a strategy for you as a teacher. Challenge them. Get them to listen to stuff that is a little bit above their own level and get them to work it out, get them to think, and help them. Meaning-focused output, this is the second point. They might find it difficult to talk about their ideas or needs, but they can do it if you, as a teacher, help them appropriately. And this word scaffolding is going to come up again. Okay. Rounding up with point 3, opportunities for learners to focus analytically on language. Analysis here being the important word. But it doesn't have to be with the teacher in charge. They can do it themselves. They need the teacher to organize activities, but they don't need the teacher to direct every activity. What does this picture represent? Okay, so we have good scaffolding and bad scaffolding, okay? So if you scaffold the activities in your classes, then your classes will be solid, like this bridge. If you don't scaffold them, this is likely to happen. So it's not about anarchy. It's not about letting the students or the children be in charge of everything. No. It's about very careful preparation. And in my own view, you know that I observe teachers frequently at graduate and postgraduate level, and I have to make judgments about whether they should get their certificates. The teachers who do the work before the class get good grades, who plan the steps of the different activities in such a way that all of the learners can achieve task completion. Now, what does that mean? We all have stronger learners and weaker learners in every class. So some of the examples of scaffolding for your different contexts in Mexico, modeling the language that they're going to need before you ask them to do a task. Sometimes we ask them to do a task and we haven't thought sufficiently about the language they want to do. They need about the language they need in order to complete the task. So you need to plan that before the class so that you can model it. Again, before the class, working out which questions exactly you're going to ask to find out whether students have really understood key points of a text. It's very easy to say, oh, don't worry if you don't understand every word. That's not actually very helpful, because in a sense, if you say that, you're giving the message that, I know you don't know very much, which is not a positive message. But if you construct your questions carefully enough, so that they can highlight chunks of the text to answer those questions. What you're saying is you do understand quite a lot, don't you? Which is much more motivating. If there's a task in the textbook that you like, but it's over challenging, there's no reason why you can't divide it into steps. Or even give different groups or different individuals different things to do. So that in the feedback, you don't do group 1 feedback, group 2 feedback, group 3 feedback, all the feedback's the same because they did the same task. Group 4 feedback, people start to snore. Group 5 feedback, everybody's fully asleep. Okay, I exaggerate, but you get the picture. I mean, if people are doing different things, it makes feedback so much more interesting. People might even stay awake. And this thing about strategies, helping them all the time. Now, talking about learning strategies would be another session, and we're getting towards the end of this session, so I'm not going to go into that in more detail. But if you just Google reading strategies, listening strategies, you will find good ideas. And if you go to somewhere like the British Council Learn or Teach English site, British Council Teach English, infinity of ideas for strategies, lesson plans, and so on. Still on scaffolding, every task should have a raison d'être, a reason for existing. And then every task should have a reason, it should have an outcome, and we're going to talk about that this afternoon in my afternoon session, if anybody's interested. But every step should have its own outcome, so that we lead our students gradually from this state of unconscious incompetence, make them aware that they don't have the competence, get them to use the language so that they become more consciously competent, and lead them into automation so that they actually use the language automatically. Okay, you're starting to look a bit tired. Don't worry, coffee is on the horizon. We're almost there, okay. We must never forget the more able learners, of course. How many of you always have an extra activity for your more able students so they don't get bored? I just saw one hand go up there. 2, 3, okay, 4, okay. But this is so important, even if it's just giving them a Time magazine to read. But give them something to do. Don't let them just sit and catch flies until the others finish. Strategies again. I emphasize that it doesn't matter what age group you're learning with. Some of these strategies are relevant to any age group. So, at the beginning of this session, I told you that what I had planned for you was this. First of all, to think about traditional and more recent views of teacher and learner roles and responsibilities. Then to think about some activities which successful language learners actively engage in. And finally, to think about a lot of suggestions of how some of these activities could be integrated into strategies for teaching in your context. I guess really, apart from saying thank you, I'd like to ask you, first of all, how far do you think my talk actually did what I said it was going to do? Did I do what I said I was going to do or not, and why? Was there, thank you for that, was there anything in there, one idea maybe, that you think you might go away with and try and put it into your classes this semester?
I would tell them to think about that you have to do something extra because they are always doing exactly what we tell them to do. But if you want to be really successful or at least pass the course, you need to work outside class. If you want to watch a movie in English and then with subtitles, well, that's okay. Or read a book with a dictionary, or go online and talk to some people in English. But
And-
do something that's out of your textbook, for
And
example.
how will you know if they actually do it or not?
Well, I actually lend them books. Sometimes they don't give them back,
Yeah, that has happened to me a lot. Movies too, when it used to be the CDs.
And
yeah.
they tell me, may I return it next semester? And I say, fine. And if they don't return it, that's fine too. I let them take it. So that's how I know because, they tell me, oh, it was about this and thank you for lending it to me and so on. But in class, we also do projects
Yeah.
and I evaluate them and they do it outside class. So I know that they're working outside.
That's so important, is it? Because the danger of projects is sometimes that the good students do it and the weaker students don't actually do anything. But anyway, we have our ways. We have our ways of finding out. Okay. Another idea that somebody is going to try and incorporate into their teaching. Yes, Maestro.
Well, I believe, yes, thank you. I believe that creativity is very important. And I was reading that sometimes we give the game, we give the activity, but I will take away with this idea that students sometimes have to develop the activity. Sometimes they have to invent the game. Okay, they have to, I don't know, maybe they will come up with great ideas, okay, and I will incorporate into my teaching practice if they have this, great game I have never thought about, okay, and they design new games, they design new activities, they will enjoy more. So that's what I will take away.
Thank you, Martin. I think when we create something, we feel, thank you, we feel tremendous achievement. And if we can get them to create in English, then we're going to give them that high that you get from achievement. Maestro.
I think one of the main things that I was a little bit skeptical, for instance, is about incorporating emotions.
Yes.
And I didn't thought about how my students are feeling with my classes. I was just concentrating developing skills and developing strategies and developing. But as you were telling about this this song, this teacher had like many of my strategies is what I like, and I think what I will try to do is speak more with my students and try to incorporate their likes and dislikes so that emotions can be part of my class too and have more impact in their outcoming.
Thank you very much for that. What's your name?
Pablo.
Pablo. Thank you, Pablo. Honestly, I've been in the business for 4 decades now. And it's not, I know nothing. I'm learning. Every time I read a new research paper, I learn more. But what I do know is that if you can get the students to feel achievement, to feel in your English classes and to express your feelings, they will come to enjoy English. No es mate. It's a way to communicate. It's a way to be. Es el saber ser, el saber hacer, el saber. It's a way to be. And it adds to their existing identity. It takes nothing away. It gives them something more. Let's have one more idea from the floor. Something you're going to do. Yes. Me va a ganar. Okay. Gáname, gana. Okay, thank you.
Okay. I am very positive that for next semester, I will be working with writing. Okay. I don't make my students write enough because of lack of time. And we know that takes up a lot of our time for grading papers, even if they're very short. So I'm committed to work, first of all, in the scaffolding for them to produce something that, whether it's simple and short, will give them that satisfaction of constructing. But I need to work my scaffolding first and have something planned, with structure, with vocabulary, with syntaxes, with everything that